So I thought I'll start with a bit of a presentation and sort of take you through the short story, and then we'll get to the actual short story. I have that on my screen as well, and then we'll try to go through it bit by bit, okay? Does that sound okay?
Okay.
Okay, let me share my screen first of all with you. Okay, let's see. Can you see this?
Still loading.
Still loading? Okay. Now can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start off with this, right? So we're looking at the thing around your neck. Let me move this to the side. Okay. We're looking at the short story by, what do you know about Chimamanda Adichie, if anything at all?
That she's Nigerian, I think.
Okay, she's a very well-known, prominent Nigerian writer who writes in English. So let me just move you through. Now, like you mentioned, one of the biggest themes and one of the biggest issues in the short story is this idea of sort of like alienation, right? It's a clash of two cultures. So obviously there's the Nigerian culture and this American culture where she has migrated to. So let's see how this comes about in the short story. Now, just to begin with, I want you to take a look at the title itself. Have you thought about the title? When it comes to the short story, have you considered the importance of the title there?
Kind of.
Okay, kind of. Okay, that's a good answer. Let's see what you take from there. So let me ask you, take a look at this painting. Have you seen this painting ever before?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, you should have. So this is by, do you know who this artist is?
Spanish song.
She's a Mexican artist called Frida Kahlo. I think you should have seen her if you watched the cartoon Coco.
Cool.
Yeah, she comes there with like, you can't miss her because she has this unibrow, the joint eyebrow. So she was a very spectacular female artist in her time, and she's very well known and popular for kind of depicting the female experience, what it feels like to be female and in her body and sort of constricted because she was disabled as well. So she was differently able. So this painting is one by hers. Now, can you see why I drew this painting? Can you see the main thing in the painting? What relates to the short story itself?
Yes.
Okay, what is it? Do you want to describe it a little bit for me?
It's something around her neck. It's like something that restricts her from.
Okay, look closely. What is it? If you look really closely, you can see like bits of drops of
Vines.
blood. What is it?
A vine-like thing.
I think it's a vine, but something definitely with thorns. Can you see that it's pricked into her neck and it's choking her, and there's like little bits of blood dripping out. Can you see?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what the significance of the little bird is. He's either trying to, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, break her out of that wine, or he's trying to sip the blood that's coming or get the nectar. I don't know what it is, but there's like a little bird here as well, maybe a hummingbird. So I just wanted to put that painting out there because for me, the moment this title, when you say thing around your neck, this is the sort of image that comes to my mind, right? Something really restricting that's sort of like choking you. So the title brings us immediately to the short story and the themes of it. So I'm just putting this out to you. What would you think if you don't take this as a symbol or a metaphor? What would be an example of a literal thing around you? Like what do you think would be like a choking kind of a thing that someone would wear around their neck?
A necklace.
Okay, a necklace, maybe a choker, but okay, let's say a necklace too. What else? Something. When you think about a thing around your neck, what else comes to mind? Let's think a little bit more. How about, yeah, were you going to say something?
No.
No? Okay. So, how about, have you known in terms of sort of like during the slave trade, did you know that slaves were given collars to wear? Yeah?
Yes.
They had these iron, so collars were made of metal iron. They had these, they are restrictive. So when I think about like the a thing around your neck, to me what immediately comes to mind is sort of bondage and restriction. So it's like a collar that's either choking you. So even like you said, if it's a necklace, it could be a pretty little necklace with diamonds and all of that, but it could also be like one of those choker necklaces, right? What else could be a thing around your neck? A noose. Yeah. If somebody is going to hang you, if you're going to be hung, a noose would be around your neck, a rope. So when you really think about this, when you kind of broaden and think about the title, what sort of emotions do you think are associated with this thing around your neck? If something like this is actually there, something that's restrictive and sort of like around your throat all the time, what sort of emotions come up?
Discomfort.
Okay, what else? Give me a list of adjectives.
Um, Something like a burden. So,
A burden, a weight, oppression, restriction, like you said, discomfort or uncomfortableness, and maybe pain, agony. It could be hurting. So all of these, they're not generally positive emotions, right? They're generally negative and sort of unpleasant and uncomfortable emotions. So we need to think about, in the bigger context of a short story, we need to think about how does the significance of this title contribute to setting, to theme, to plot, and even to characterization, okay, of Akuna's character and the rest. So those are just some things for you to think about. Really think about the title because it's going to be really important in terms of this short story's context. So let's move on. Now, you look at the context of the short story. Now, you know that the context is basically the setting or the background in which the story is written, right? If you really look at it in two backgrounds, you will see that there is Laos in Nigeria, and there is America, obviously, where she migrates to. And America, I think there are two specific towns mentioned. There's Maine and Connecticut, where she moves from one place to the other, right? So I want you to go back later when you're rereading the short story. You need to go back and look at the descriptions of each place. Okay? For example, for you, I've just pointed down a few here for you, and I want you to go and look for it yourself. So when it comes to Nigeria, her house, it's been described that the entire family lives in one room with unpainted walls, and there are not enough chairs to go around. So what are these all kind of indicators of?
poverty.
Yes, poverty, and maybe not like a very high social class, and sort of like it's not exactly a picture of wealth and prosperity, right? But at the same time, there's a huge description of community, right? All around this space of Nigeria is entirely, there's relatives, there's neighbors, there's friends, there's aunts, uncles, cousins, like so many people. There is a real sense of community and a lot of people. So like you mentioned, there is poverty mentioned there as well. So you need to go back to the short story and take a look. What are the indicators? For example, how is the house depicted, the car, the living conditions, and the roads, etc., like the schools. And again, this idea of family ties. Really think about these things. What are family ties like in Nigeria? What do they look like? What about education? What does the education system look like? And does she have access to it? Akuna, specifically, this character. And then I also want you to think about Akuna's kind of place in this society. In Nigeria, apparently, from what we can understand, not a very prosperous or rich family. What are the indicators about Akuna's education that you can find in the short story? How does she come about in terms of education?
Mm. She kind of criticizes the Nigerian language.
Okay, she criticizes, but also is she Do you remember what is mentioned about her as a student? Is she sort of like a not a very good student, or is she an exceptional learner? What sort of a student is she?
I think she was really good at studies.
Yeah, she was supposed to be excellent because apparently her parents didn't even need to bribe in order to get her marks or whatever in the system, because she was getting straight A's, and so clearly an intelligent and a girl with some level of good education, right? So just keep all of those things in mind. Now, one thing I didn't fill out all of this because I want you to properly take a look through and fill the list yourself. But while we go through the short story, one thing I really want you to keep an eye out is for contrasts. So there are like the first thing I mentioned was the title of the short story and its importance. And the second thing is contrast. This entire short story is sort of made through a tension of contrast. There's one thing, there's another. There is something depicted this way, there's something else depicted this. So really keep an eye out for the contrast, okay? So now we look at America. So in contrast to Nigeria, obviously America looks really good, right? So it's like the first place she goes to with her uncle it's a small white town. Now, what does white here mean? Does it mean that the whole town is painted white in very pretty white houses or something? What is small white town?
Only white people live there.
It's an indicator of race. So right there immediately, now you need to visualize this. So it's a predominantly black girl. It's a girl from Nigeria and her uncle, and these people are living in a predominantly white town. Almost everyone there is white. So race is a key factor that comes in here, right? So a 30-year-old house by a lake. So the uncle is clearly, he's self-sufficient. He's become independent now, and he has like a good salary and income, like he boasts about a lot. So these little indicators, sorry, that just went to the other side. Hot dogs, like bright red nail polish. And you remember the belief everyone in Nigeria thought that everybody in America has a car and a
Gun.
car and a gun. That's what they thought. That so that this generalization. So there are these expectations of what America is going to look like, and I want you to look at the depictions of America as well, because there's quite a lot there. There are descriptions of her going to community college, the people she meets, and sort of the kind of apartment she lives in, and the kind of work she does. So take a look at the depiction of America as well. Okay, I'm not going to go into detail on that, but let's move to the next thing. Now, I was talking about contrasts. Now, when we're talking about contrasts, I will get to this section in a bit, the trick to understand America. But when I was talking about contrast, I want you to think about this idea of richness or wealth. And rich how? Okay? I need you to think, in what ways is America depicted as rich? And in what ways is Nigeria depicted as rich? Okay? Even though all we see about Nigeria is the poverty, the misery, and the difficulties that people are going through, but there is a contrast here between poor Nigeria and rich America, which, if you really sort of peel back the layers and you look at it, you will find that there are different kinds of wealth. Okay, so America is clearly rich in the material aspect. So all these houses and cars and being able to earn, like the uncle boasts about, right? So he's like, oh, I have this salary now and I'm able to buy my own house and all of that. But on the other hand, if you really look at Nigeria, despite it being in Africa and being a poor country, what about these aspects? Community-wise, which of the two countries would you say is richer in community from the depiction in the short story? Sorry, yeah?
Nigeria.
Yes, so it's community. There's everyone comes together. So the moment she received the good news that she won the green card, the lottery to America, everybody comes together to celebrate, right? So there's a feeling of togetherness. There's a feeling of everyone being on your side. Basically, you're not isolated. So that obviously ties into spiritual. So there's a spiritual wealth, like, and psychological and emotional. You feel connected. You feel you're part of a bigger circle. You feel your life has a purpose. You're not isolated. So it really gets you thinking about the contrasts, right? Like I mentioned, like the contrast between the two countries, even though supposedly, oh my God, like you get to go to America. This is like such a big deal to people, right? Okay. So then we move on to this part of it, which this is a really important thing. Remember this quote. This is something that the uncle says in the very first days. I think the very first day that he takes her to his house or something. He says that the trick to understand America is that America was. Do you want to read that out for me?
Devoted.
Yes, it was give and take. And what else?
You gave up a lot, but you gained a lot too.
Okay, so it's basically so the way the very first way that he sort of depicts or lays out America and American culture to be, it's a transaction, right? It's not like a sort of communal everybody getting together to sort of build something. It's a transaction. You give this, I give you that. You give up something and you gain something in return. So it's very monetary and kind of like a very materialistic kind of transaction, right? So you need to remember this quote because it's going to come up a lot in the short story for you to think about these questions. What will she be asked to give up? Okay, from her move to America and going to migration, basically leaving behind her family and her country. What will she be asked to give up, and what will she gain? So we're going to look at what that sort of back and forth transaction is going to look like, and eventually you also need to think about this question: what is she going to take back? Okay, what will she take back from something that's been taken from her, something that has been sort of forcibly taken from her? How will she take it back? How is she going to take it back? So that's something important to think about. Now, just to give you an idea, I know that we hear about Nigeria, we know about Nigeria, but it's important when you're studying like a short story or anything in this style, to get into the context of it, you kind of need to look at what the culture is like. So I just made this little slide for you. So this is what Nigerian culture looks like. It's a lot of food, people getting together to cook, to sing, to dance. They obviously, any culture has the any society, any culture, any country has their negatives and their, so obviously there could be poverty, there could be all sorts of social anxiety and unrest and all these things. But this is what Nigerian culture generally looks like. And you can see, right? They're dressed in a particular way. It's vibrant colors, and this is food. I just put down a picture of this. I think in the short story there is a reference to what is that word? Can you remember what that word was? It begins with G. We will get back to it when we're reading the short story. But so this is that food. It's sort of like something made of cassava, apparently cassava tubers mashed together. So this white ball of like, I don't know, sort of like
Gari, right?
What is it?
Gari.
Gari, yes, gari is the word. So this is these are the traditional foods. So just to get an idea of, like, immerse yourself into the short story when you're actually reading it, right? And so then it comes back to the question of what we think. What does the main metaphor? So now we spoke about the importance of the title, right? And in that title, so the obviously a metaphor jumps out at you. It's that thing around your neck, which is an unnamed thing. We don't know what the thing is, but there's something around that main character's neck. So what does this symbolize? We need to think. Other elements of suffocation. So the suffocation is there, the pressure of sort of navigating a foreign, alien, and often hostile environment. We need to kind of really delve into and think about that, because America, in spite of all people's expectations and thinking it's like the land of the rich and the land of dreams and glory, it comes across as hostile in the short story, right? Do you remember? Can you give me some instances where America was actually hostile towards this main character? There are some key instances. Can you remember them?
At the school, because she's black, they asked racist question.
Okay, so there's racism. There's clearly racism coming in from the questions people ask and the way that they speak about. But what about the other things, sort of like the systemic abuse that she has to go through, like sh- through somebody that she trusted. Now you rely on a relative who you trusted to sort of help you through your journey, but are you placed in a warm and welcoming and nice environment? There is a hostility there, right? There's clearly abuse, like he's coming to abuse her in the dead of the night, and his excuse for that is it's give and take. Like, this is what it's like in America. You give me something, I give you something, right? So the it doesn't really come across as a warm and communal environment. And the irony here is that this is a Nigerian man. This is not an American speaking. This is a Nigerian man who probably was brought up with values of community and helping each other and being there for family. But this man, after living in America for a while, what is his attitude towards things? It's this very hostile, like alienated, kind of detached attitude. Like, if you want something, you better give me something, right? So there's that feeling of hostility in the environment, and we'll look more into that when we're reading the short story. And obviously, there's loneliness and there's alienation. Okay, think about the different ways in which she is alienated. So there's also the very interesting idea. Now, we spoke about when we were talking about the thing around your neck as something restraining. We spoke about the idea of oppression and sort of like restraint. So restraint is, in other words, it's oppression. It's a feeling of being oppressed and not being able to have your freedom and liberation, right? So I need you to think about really what are the multiple ways or the kinds of oppression that you can note in the short story. Okay, how do you see oppression as happening for this main character, or even think about for other characters as well? Are there different ways that other characters are oppressed too? Then really we will look at silence. Okay, since we're talking about the thing around your neck and we're thinking about oppression, we will really look at the idea of silence in the short story, okay, when we're looking at it. Now, this is something for you to do later. Look at the list of characters now, because you know that one of the most important elements in a short story, aside from plot, settings, context, and all of that, is obviously characters, right? So look at the list of characters for a very short story, and for something that sort of centers all around Akuna and her experience. There is a whole host of characters, like a lot of characters, even more than this, even more than I've listed. So take a look at all of these characters and try to see if you can divide them. Are they oppressed, or are they the oppressor? Okay? Yeah? Let's just take one randomly out of the blue. Would you say that the mother, is she an oppressed person or an oppressor?
Oppressed.
Okay, give me the key reason why you would say that she's oppressed. How is she oppressed?
With responsibilities of mental her family
Okay,
and economic pressure.
Okay, she is oppressed with responsibilities, but also, if you remember, she is oppressed by the system. She is oppressed by the Nigerian, sort of like the system and the societal things that go on. Because if you can remember, she is only, I think she's working some very minimal wage job, but she has to take chunks out of her salary to bribe the school officials in order to get her children to pass the exams, right? I remember there was a point like that. So think about those little tiny details. So that's the trick in a short story. You have to really look at what is unsaid, what is just hinted at, like, because nothing's going to be, some things are sometimes not given big descriptions, but there are little indicators for things, right? Then let's randomly take I'm just going to take two more characters. Uncle, pretty obvious answer. What would the uncle be?
Oppressor.
Oppressor. Okay, that's what we would think, right on, like spot on. We would think, okay, obviously he's the oppressor because he's trying to oppress someone even lower than him who is trying to make a new life in the country. But then also think about, like, these things are very nuanced, right? It doesn't excuse his behavior. Obviously, it doesn't say that what he did was right. But also there's a very interesting point in the story about how, can you remember when the uncle moved to America? People, apparently the Americans started, the neighbors started gossiping that the squirrels around the neighborhood were disappearing, right? Do you remember that point? Yeah? No? Yes or no? I can't hear you.
Yeah.
You do remember. Okay. So if you think about that, what is that? That's also that like we think of the uncle as the oppressor, but in certain ways he was oppressed, or he, look at the things that were done to him. Like you move to a new country and people suddenly assume that you're eating all the squirrels in the neighborhood, right? This is racism. This is overt racism without any bias or without any basis. So they are very nuanced in that way, right? So what about Yuan? What about this character of Yuan? Oppressor or oppressed?
He might be oppressed too because
He might be oppressed too, but at the same time, he's also, interestingly, he could be in the position of oppressor as well, because remember, he's taking on Akuna for a minimum wage job, and he is paying her under the table a lesser salary than he should be paying. So again, systemic oppression. See, like, you get oppressed on one hand and then you oppress somebody else on the other. So this is something for you to think about. I'm just throwing things out there for you so you can go back and reanalyze the short story and sort of look at all these different elements, right? Now let's look at this. Okay. So I'm wondering whether to switch to the short story for. Do you want to continue the presentation and then look at the short story, or do you want to pause this for a minute and do that? What would you like?
anything's okay.
Anything's fine. Okay, let's take a look at a couple more slides, because this meeting is ending in 10 minutes. And once it does, just rejoin from the same link. So I'll just keep on going through the slides until this finishes. So let's take a look at the themes of the short story, right? So you know that a key theme is obviously, what's this? Alienation, right? And we already spoke about the idea of contrast, about how things are black, white, maybe there's gray in between, but there's everything is always contrasting. So before we get to the idea of alienation, I want you to think of the idea of connection. So if there's alienation on one side, obviously the contrasting one would be connection, right? So out off the top of your mind, can you tell me anything that you remember about points of connection for Akona? Who did she connect to? What, who does she connect with after her move to America, and why? What were the reasons? Like, can you remember any points of connection for her in the middle of this vast sort of sea of disconnect and loneliness and alienation? What were the little points of connection that you could see?
With her partner,
Sorry?
with her partner, the American boy.
Okay, with the partner was the obvious one. What other points of connection? After going to America.
Maybe even with Juan.
Okay, how so with Juan? Yuan.
Because he's the only one who provided her something when she lost everything.
Okay, that could be a point of connection. And again, look very carefully at these little instances, right? There's one instance later towards the end of the short story where there was she says that maybe at the point that her father died, there was a point where she was working and she got goosebumps, right? And she was entirely covered in goosebumps and she didn't know why. And who notices this? Can you remember?
No.
It's Yuan who notices it. So that's a very interesting point for you to think about. So she gets goosebumps and her whole body's covered in goosebumps. And interestingly, Yuan notices this. So again, a point of connection. So they are clearly close enough that he's able to see these things about another person. He's the one who notices that she's got goosebumps, and he says something like, "Oh, like should we turn the heat on, or do you want to go to a less colder place or something?" So that's the key. That's a point of connection for sure. Then when she moves to America. First moves to America, rather than with her uncle, do you remember who she really connects with and feels at home after she moves to her uncle's house?
His wife.
It's with the uncle's wife and with the daughters, right? So again, that sense of Nigerian community. So she feels at home, and if you really look at that passage, it's really sweet because the reason she feels at home is because the kids call her auntie, I think. I think the daughters call her auntie and the wife calls her sister or something like this. So this sense of solidarity and community, and that you're not alone. Like we are with you, and there are other people too. So those are some of the points of connection, but think a bit more. Like I can't remember off the top of my head. Really go through the short story and see what else you can find, right? And then think about what are the reasons for these connecting points at all of these points. Why does she connect with these people? For example, with the uncle's wife and with the daughters, what's the reason for that point of connection? So if you really think about it, clearly it's shared cultural heritage, right? It's the shared the food they bond over, and then the way of speaking and the kind of female solidarity. So it's the cultural heritage. Then as time progresses, what are her reasons for her connection with the American boy, like the male partner or the lover that she has, right? Think about how those reasons change. Because towards the end, she's not connecting with the American out of sort of any shared views or values, right? I know he talks a lot about I've been to Africa and I've been to Ghana and all of that. So that might be a little bit of an indicator. But what do you think is the main reason for her connection at that point?
Loneliness.
It's clearly it's loneliness. It's just being desperate for some sort of human interaction. Basically, it's a need to be seen. It's a need for somebody to see her, because I think towards that point of the short story, she's just become invisible. She feels that nobody sees her, nobody understands her, so she's just floating through life. And then there's a guy who actually knows the difference in African countries, and he talks about African food and the different varieties of it. And she's like, "Oh my God, finally I feel seen," right? So that's an interesting thing to think about. So then, obviously, in contrast to connection, there is the overarching huge theme of alienation. So, in what ways is the character alienated in this context? So, I've listed down a few here. So, obviously, people making racist comments, people who don't really understand her culture or where she comes from, they're commenting on her hair, generalizing Africa, saying that, oh, like elephants and safaris. And I think there are some really sort of degrading questions, right? Like, do you own a house? Like, do you have a house? Do you have houses in Africa or something like that? So go back to the short story and look at those. And then again, a core theme of alienation, abuse by a trusted person, one who she did have a connection. So this so-called uncle, when you trust in somebody to sort of look after you and be there for you, and that person turns out to be your abuser, what happens to you inside? Like you become disconnected and alienated in a sense too, right? You no longer feel, do you get what I'm trying to say? Yeah. In addition to the cultural alienation and everything she's feeling, she also feels, okay, now there's nobody that I can trust. The person that I thought I could trust, I can't even trust them anymore, right? So there's that aspect of alienation as well. And then there is obviously the lack of conversation or anything to bond about, or there's nothing that she has in common with the people in America. Now, again, we are tying this back to when we think about the reasons why she connected with that male lover. Remember, do you remember her anxiety? when the partner, he came after her and he asked her out a couple of times, but when he didn't turn up the last night, do you remember how anxious she got? She was, and she jumped. And there's a point in there's a line that says, "You said yes. You said yes. You would go out with him even before he asked because you were so afraid that he would not come back or he would not ask again." So you can see that sense of sort of like desperation and loneliness and this utter just need for connection with somebody, right? So it paints her in a very sympathetic light, actually, if you think about it. So clearly, here's a character who's suffering from suffocating physical, emotional weight of loneliness, anxiety, and cultural alienation, right? But also something to later think about is how does this alienation happen even with her lover? Okay, so she bonded with him and they got on well for quite a good while and they seem to have like a good relationship going. But like bit by bit, again, this sense of alienation, it just comes up. She can't sort of run away from it. It just follows her. Like, and I think we need to go back to the short story and really look at how does this alienation happen. Like, she is in love with this man, they're in a relationship, but more and more she feels lonely inside the relationship, right? Did you notice that as the relationship proceeds? Yeah, did you notice it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't hear you, but I'll take that as a yes. um as the relationship keeps proceeding, she gets more and more alienated and more lonely. So the points of connection that she thought that they had start to sort of break down. And let's take a look at this breakdown of this relationship, right? Okay, we have, I think I'm going to stop this now and then restart because the meeting is almost over. How was it so far? Was it clear?
Yes, I.
Yeah? Do you still, if you have any questions, note them down so we can revisit and we can think about them again, okay? But yeah, we are going to look at this particular slide and then we'll go through the short story a bit. So, another thing, since we were talking about contrast all this time, there is the contrast of silence in the short story, right? So you will see that there is silence or muteness, or basically keeping quiet and keeping mute, as opposed to talking and vocalizing, right? So there's just a little activity that I've laid out for you here, and you can do this in your own time. Really go through the short story and try to find the silent or the voiceless characters. Who are the silent ones? Who are the ones without a voice, who don't speak, right? Who doesn't speak? And try to list down all the times that they do stay silent. Okay? And then in contrast to that, there are the characters who talk. Okay? There are ones who are vocalizing. So there are people who talk a lot, and there are people who don't talk. So kind of look at this idea of silence as well. Who is silent? Why are they silent? Who is talking? Why are they talking? Why do they have the ability or the right to talk and certain people don't? Okay? So look at these two, like do this activity in your own time. Um, find the silent or voiceless characters and list down the times they say silent. And then in contrast, look for the loud or vocal characters and analyze the instances where they do speak up or where they vocalize and talk, right? Um, Let me see. Maybe we can take a look at this slide as well before we proceed. So while we go through the short story, I want you to look at, now we were talking about that thing around your neck. We were talking about restraint. We were talking about oppression. We were talking about shackles, somebody feeling like collared in, restrained, shackles. And you can see in this picture as well, there is a lady who is throwing off her handcuffs, so a different kind of shackles and just breaking free. So, and here there's like a girl who's just like being stopped from talking, like her mouth is covered up. So you need to think about this question: what are the multiple ways that Akuna's character is oppressed in this story? Okay? Okay, so there's going to be different layers of oppression. So if we take the thing around your neck as a symbol, if you take it as a metaphor for something, for oppression, basically, there are different layers to it. Okay, Akuna's character, she is oppressed in different ways. She is oppressed because of her gender. She's oppressed because she's a female, because she's a woman. She's oppressed in a certain way. Then there's racial oppression. Because of her race, she is discriminated and oppressed in a different way. Then there's also social oppression. Like, how is she oppressed in terms of education, in terms of her career, like what she does for work? Does she have equal rights in society? Like, how is she placed in all of these? Okay. And then there's also sexual oppression, obviously, which is tied into gender and of her being a woman. There are the topics of exploitation, sexually being exploited, abused, and basically the notion that you can be sexually exploited in return for favors that you are granted. So all these ways are different layers of oppression that all pile onto this character, right? It's very interesting because it's never said out loud. She never talks about it. She never openly says it. But if you take the character and sort of peel away the layers, you see that there are so many of these little layers there, right? And then there's discrimination against, obviously, racial and sexist discrimination. And then there's also the oppression of shame. She carries shame with her, and we'll look in the short story what she carries that shame for. But try to think about the way she carries sort of shame for obviously what she went through with the uncle who sexually exploited her, but also the shame of not having anything to tell the people back home. Like, she doesn't have big achievements. Like, she can't tell them how she's struggling or how lonely she is. So all these things come with a lot of baggage of shame for her, right? Now, in respect for all these layers of oppression, as a female, as a black woman, as an African, in her social status, all of this, really contrast it with the white male character that you were talking about, her lover or her American partner. Really look at the two side by side. So there's the black woman and there's the white male. Look at it in contrast and think about this question. Later on, you can come back to this question and you'll probably find an answer yourself. What could be the possible reasons that she is so upset with her partner? Because throughout their relationship at different points, she gets upset at him for various reasons. Really look at those moments. Why does she get into conflict with him? Why does she get angry at him or upset at him? Right? That's something for you to think about that will reveal a lot about her character and his character in the towards the end, right? Okay, so we'll get back to this after reading the short story. But just in general, while we're reading it, just try to think about this. List down the characteristics or traits that you find in Akuna's personality. Okay, how has she been depicted? So let me just move back from that and we will get to the short story a bit and go through that bit by bit. Okay, we'll go through it fast because I think you've read it already and I don't need to go word by word, but I've highlighted some things. Now we're looking at the thing around your neck. Okay, from the very first line, it says, you thought everybody in America had a car and a gun. Your uncles and aunts and cousins thought so too. So there's this idea of you thought, like, look at the words that I've highlighted. And again, it's this idea of people having an image of America from afar where no one has really, they don't really know anything about America. They haven't been there. And it kind of makes you wonder, do you think this is information they have gotten from the uncle? Because the uncle seems like the only person who had migrated to America, right? So what if he's the one who's telling these people that, oh, like everybody here has a car and everybody has a gun? Like, where do they get this information, right? So look at that. So right after you won the American visa lottery, they told you. So other people are telling her, In a month, you'll have a big car, soon a big house, but don't buy a gun like those Americans. So then again, look at how these depictions are given, right? The room in Lagos where she lives with her family, and everybody comes to say goodbye in loud voices and then tell you with lowered voices what they wanted you to send them. Doesn't this remind you a bit of Sri Lanka as well? Yeah. Say that if like our people, if you're going abroad or if you're going to like Avila, they are like, oh, bye, I don't know, have a good life and me matat poddak me make matat. So this is that kind of like a environment, right? So, but again, very communal. Like everyone's getting together. There's a lot of solidarity. And look at this. At this point, you said, okay, no problem. Okay. Look at the things that I've noticed. So, things that I've highlighted. So, one time where this character speaks. Then, as you're going through the short story, so I've highlighted bits and pieces here. So, this uncle is the one who has started the whole migration process for them, and he's put them for the American visa lottery. And again, this line that I told you was really important to kind of keep in mind, right? The trick was to understand America, to know that America was give and take. You gave up a lot, but you gained a lot too. So as you're reading this, look for these indicators. Look for how America is depicted in contrast to Nigeria, like we were talking about in the presentation, right? So this is what I had mentioned. So they asked where you learned to speak English and if you had real houses back in Africa. So again, overt racism, but also this tells us about something that we were talking about the level of education of Akuna, right? So she is clearly someone who's fluent or at least conversant in English. And this comes as a shock to American people too. They're like, where did you learn to speak English so well? So this is not an uneducated village girl. This is a girl with some level of education and fluency, right? So all of these, take a look at the contrast in how they look at her. And then really look at the ones that I've highlighted here in yellow. When people are asking her questions, when people are talking to her, asking her this, asking that, you smiled tightly when they asked those questions. You laughed, okay? And then you wondered what he would tell his wife, why you had left. As the short story progresses from here, try to really take a close analysis. What are the instances where she speaks, right? Now she's the main protagonist in the short story, but we don't hear her voice. We don't hear her actually saying anything. She doesn't retort. She doesn't speak back. She doesn't say anything. She's either smiling or laughing or keeping quiet or running away or like leaving the house. She's doing different actions, but she doesn't speak. Okay? So this will bring you back very clearly to the theme of the short story. Like there's something around her neck and it's stopping her from speaking. So that lack of being able to vocalize, the silence, right? So again, after the uncle abuses her, she just leaves. She locks herself in the bathroom and then she leaves, walking down the road, not knowing where she's gonna go. She doesn't have a home to go to. She doesn't know what her life is going to be like now, but she just leaves because she can't stay there anymore. So then she gets to Connecticut and meets Yuan. And then look at this, how Nigeria is described, right? Sometimes you sat on the lumpy mattress of your twin bed and thought about home. Your aunts who hawked dried fish and plantains, cajoling customers to buy and then shouting insults when they didn't. Your uncles who drank local gin and crammed their families and lives into single rooms. So again, can you see that, in contrast to the alienated, detached, like sort of how do you call it, like isolating environment of America, there's a lot of noise. And doesn't this kind of remind you of sort of like our PETA or like even a market? Like it doesn't have to be PETA, even like Kalutara say that you go to the market. Doesn't it remind you of that? The noise, the Kagahilla people screaming, laughing, like there's so much like noise and things going on. So in Western culture, it's very different. It's more, people are very isolated. They mind their own business. They do their own thing. So there's a huge description of the contrast between Nigeria and America that you need to look through there and see we were talking about systemic oppression. Look, your mother, whose salary was barely enough to pay your brother's school fees at the secondary school, um, and where you have to give the teachers some money if you want the kids to get an A, right? So look at Akuna's education levels. You had never needed to pay for an A, never slipped a brown envelope to a teacher because she was really good at her studies, right? And now she's sending her earnings. Now that she's in America and she's earning in dollars, she's sending money back home. But look at this. You wrapped the money carefully in white paper, but you didn't write a letter, right? So again, we come back to that theme of silence, voicelessness. Like, surely she has things that she wants to say, right? It's a new country. She's gone through different experiences. Like, even about the abuse that she suffered through her uncle, like, she's not speaking. She's not talking about any of it. So, and then she says there was nothing to write about. Is that necessarily true? Think about it. Was there really nothing to write about? Or is she purposefully choosing not to? Is there a reason why she? I wouldn't say she's purposefully choosing, but is there some sort of a reason that's stopping her from speaking, right? And again, as we go through the next paragraphs, it's you wanted to write, you wanted to write, you wanted to write, you wanted to write. See how many times it's been repeated. But does she write? Does she speak? Does she have anyone to speak with? In these entire, I think, first 4 or 5 pages, you hear other people talking to her, but are there any instances where she talks back? Or she replies or says anything, right? So see again, you wanted to write, you wanted to write. So she wants to tell all these details, but for some reason she doesn't. And why? Okay, and after this very long description of passages, and again, this is really important. Like, take a look at this particular paragraph. Sometimes you felt so invisible that you tried to walk through your wall into the hallway. Can you see what a sad and sort of like that's a terribly isolating picture, right? Imagine somebody who she doesn't even know if she's real anymore because there's no one to talk to, there's nobody who understands her, so she's not sure if she's real or alive. So she walks into walls just to hit herself and feel that she can feel pain or that she's existing. And see, Yuan, again, a point of connection that we were talking. Yuan actually asked her, is there some sort of a man who's hitting you? Because he would take care of him. So see, Yuan is being in a protective role at this point. And again, does she say anything? You laughed a mysterious laugh. Not a single word. She doesn't talk, right? And then at night, something would wrap itself around your neck. Now look at the image, like the something wrapping itself around your neck. It almost, what does it remind you of? When you hear this line, now we were talking about chokers and necklaces and collars, but when it says something would wrap itself around your neck, what does that remind you of?
Kind of like a snake.
Isn't it like a python? It's like a giant python that's just coming and wrapping, and it's slowly constrict, like boa constrictors, like those snakes. It's like slowly constricting your chest and you're choking, right? Something that very nearly choked you before you fell asleep. Okay. Now we go on to descriptions of the racism in America, right? So people are asking her whether she's from Jamaica because she thought that they think that every black person with an accent was Jamaican. And then they say that they love elephants and they go on safaris in Africa. And then comes this male character, right? The person she falls in love with. So in contrast to these people who are generalizing her and just treating her as like a, I don't know, some sort of object, some sort of exotic thing, there's a person who actually notices the differences in her. So he asks if you're Yoruba or Igbo. I think these are, I want to say, tribes or sectors in Nigeria. So Yoruba or Igbo, because you didn't have a Fulani face. And you were immediately surprised. You're like, how do you even know about any of these, right? And he asks her name for the first time. And he doesn't comment on her name or her appearance or anything like that. And again, by this time, she's very disillusioned with America and Americans to begin with, right? So Akuna at this point, she says, you wanted to feel disdain, to show it as you brought his order. And she's clearly still a waitress at this place where he's coming to eat. Because white people who like Africa too much and those who liked Africa too little were the same, condescending. So this is interesting because it shows you two types of racism. Like this is all racism. In the end, there are people who go like, oh my God, we love Africa. It's like Africa or any other country, or like Asia. Like sometimes we even get it even about India or I don't know, Sri Lanka or something. Oh my God, I love that country. It's like so amazing. I've been there, whatever. And then there's people who are like, oh, you're from like a third world country. Like we've seen those in pictures. Like it's so there are two different, and they're both the same form of racism or like different forms of the same racism. So condescending. So she doesn't like it when people are condescending about her and her culture, right? And then it goes to a description of the kind of um, racism she experienced in the classroom, right? And then again, still look at the descriptions. Like again, this girl Akuna is pretty silent in this interaction, but the dude, he's talking and talking and talking, like he just won't stop, right? Again, remember the point that I told you to notice the people, the characters in the story who do talk and the ones who are silent. So look at the contrast here. She barely says one or two words, and he's the one just talking away. And then you looked at him in the bright light and noticed that his eyes were the color of, so his green eyes are the first thing that she kind of falls in love with too, as well. So now look how the dynamic changes a little bit, right? So from this girl who, since landing in America, has been silent, silent, silent throughout everything that she was going through. Then suddenly she starts getting interest, and she actually talks back. She says, you asked him where he ended up finding himself. And again, the response, though he laughed, you did not laugh. So what do you understand from that sentence?
Yes.
Hmm? Was that?
No, keep
No, what do you understand from that sentence when you say that you asked him where he ended up finding himself and he laughed, but you didn't laugh? What is that sentence?
I think she's trying to like I don't remember that part clearly.
You don't remember it? You can see the screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm talking about this particular part. So it again, it shows a kind of cultural disconnect, right? So she is asking him a serious question, and she doesn't understand this social background and the context where he comes from. So she's like, he said he had taken a couple of years off to discover himself and travel mostly to Africa and Asia. Now, this is a very white people thing. Okay, like in our societies or like in our countries, we don't have the luxury of taking a couple of years to just travel the world and visit countries and to try to find who we are, because people are too busy surviving and people are trying to make ends meet and I don't know, earn their degrees and find a job and stuff, right? But so she genuinely doesn't understand this cultural context. So she asks him a serious question. You asked him where he ended up finding himself, and he thinks this is a joke. He just laughs at it. And this is the first point where you kind of notice that these two, even though they have a point of connection, there's like alienation happening in between them, right? So look at these. And then again, we talk about she keeps rejecting his advances, but then when she feels that he might not come back and he might not be there, she panics and she becomes completely desperate, and she's like, you panicked when he wasn't standing at the door after your shift, and you prayed. And for the first time, she's actually praying, and before he can even say anything, she jumps up and she's like, yes, 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 I will go out with you. So again, those indicators of extreme loneliness, right? Desperation and like a sort of a very pathetic loneliness to the point where you would jump at the, like just to be close to somebody, right? And then Look at this. You knew you had become comfortable when you told him that you watched Jeopardy on the restaurant and that you. So now slowly she's beginning to open up, right? Now, from this character who was quiet all of this time, you can see that she's telling him things. She's telling him her opinions. She's telling him her thoughts and feelings. And then here, you knew you had become close when you told him that your father was not really a school teacher in Lagos. You told him about that. So she's telling him her memories, her about her life, about her family back home, and this very sort of sad and traumatic memory of what happened with her father in the car one day on a rainy day. So you can see that he keeps she's starting to tell him things, but again, look at this. After she describes this entire incident of what happened with her father, after you told him this, he kind of like tightened his lips and he held your hand and he said, "Oh, I understand how you feel." And what happens then? Do you think this white male character is actually able to understand what this girl and her father went through?
No,
Why do you think?
because his life is completely different.
It's just completely different. And it's the social context, like the gap between, like the chasm between the two societies are so vast that he can't even I'm sure he can't even process it. He probably hears this like a sort of like a scene in a teledrama or like a scene in a movie or something, but he can't really relate to it, right? So he tries to hold her hand and says he understood how you felt. Look what she does. She shook your hand free, suddenly annoyed. So suddenly she's angry and she's like there's anger coming up. And why is this? Now remember in the slides I had asked you the question, what are the reasons why she's so upset at her partner? Why does she start getting upset at him, right? So she shakes her hand free, suddenly annoyed, because he thought the world was or ought to be full of people like him. So again, that gap in understanding, he can't ever fully really understand where she comes from, right? So then their relationship progresses and they do stuff, and she becomes more comfortable showing him her culture and doing stuff. But look at this, that remember that food we were talking about. So she cooks for him, but after he ate gari and onugbu soup, he threw up in your sink. Now, like, just try to imagine that. It's kind of he didn't mean it to be insulting, but do you feel how kind of like bothersome that would be? Just imagine if maybe you cook something, like say that you had like an American boyfriend and you cooked him a what would you make? Some nice pole roti and lunu miris, or else made him a kiribat, and okomatikala, this fellow goes and pukes everything in the sink. What would you feel? What would you feel, Kino? Gahaidallala. You would be very annoyed because you would spend all that time cooking all of that, and this fellow goes and throws up, right? So again, you can see the cultural differences and the way that, like, bit by bit this alienation is coming in, right? But she says you didn't mind though, because now you'd be able to cook onugbu soup with meat. So apparently he is a vegetarian. He has all these policies and values and notions about the world, but you did not tell him that back home the meat pieces, like meat is so rare, it's such a rare commodity that when you do eat it, it's the size of half your finger. So it's just like tiny pieces of meat, right? So all these cultural differences and all these things, these two are like little tensions. Like you can see tiny tensions building up in the relationship, right? And then there's this very strange moment where once they're at a restaurant and the waiter talks about sort of like some personal matters about him visiting China and whatnot. And this moment really bothers her. And this is a moment of one of the first serious ruptures in their relationships, because people automatically assume, based on race, that this white male and a black female can't be a couple. So they're dating, like they're clearly dating, they're on a date, they're eating out at a restaurant. But the people who see them, they're like, oh, this can't be a couple. This is so that levels of racism, right? Like there's so much racism, and this guy doesn't speak up, and this is the first time he doesn't talk. Now this fellow who's talking and talking and talking from morning till night, he smiled and he said nothing. Okay, this is a very interesting point for you to analyze about this guy's character, about this male character's actual character. Why does he stay quiet at that particular point? Okay, so see again, and she's so angry at that point. She's like, oh, like she has a fight with him, and you told him why you were upset. And when the Chinese man had assumed that you could not possibly be his girlfriend, the dude had smiled and said nothing. And he does apologize after the fight, but he gazed at you blankly, and you knew that he did not understand. So, do you see where the tensions are coming into the relationship? There's sort of like a gap in understanding each other. He can't fully understand her, she can't fully understand him, right? So these things are happening. And then there's a really interesting section where you need to read and analyze for yourself about this present giving. Like he starts showering her with different presents, and she's like, "What's the point of all of this? Like, why are you doing this? Like, why?" She doesn't really see a value in the things that he's doing for her, precisely because of that cultural gap. Because she comes from a background where are presents just supposed to be for show? Do you think in Nigeria, if you give someone a present, would you give them something like a, I don't know, a fancy stuffed toy or something? Do you think that's the kind of culture?
No.
Hmm?
No.
Yeah, just try to imagine like coming from a background of poverty or like where people don't have a lot in life. Wouldn't you rather be giving them something practical, like maybe like food for your next meal or buy you a bag's worth of groceries or I don't know, some sort of like a laptop for your schoolwork or something. It's always things with a you like a purpose, right? So that's what she's trying to tell him, and she's trying to explain this to him, and this guy just doesn't get it, right? And then he talks about wanting to visit Nigeria with her and saying that he could pay for both of you to go. So he wants to, again, this money power, right? We were talking about the ways in which Akuna is oppressed. And obviously, financially is one layer of it. And this guy is obviously well off. And he's like, I can give you money. I can like buy you a plane ticket. And she doesn't want this. Okay, she's very annoyed by this. She doesn't want it, and this shows you something about Akuna's character. So after we're done, we'll go back to that slide and try to see the question of what are the characteristics of Akuna's personality, right? So look at this interesting. You did not want him to go to Nigeria to add it to the list of countries where he went to gawk. What does gawk mean? What's the word gawk?
Stare.
Stare, like basically stare in like singular terms, it would be like khataram balang, like you just like you're so you don't understand what's going on. You just khatar, just staring at people, what's happening, right? So she doesn't want to display her people to his gaze, like for him to stare at and judge and be like, oh, secretly feel like, oh, like I'm better than these people because I'm so glad I wasn't born in like a third world country or something. So she really doesn't want that from him. And also, she says that the lives of poor people who could never gawk back at his life because they will never have the opportunity to come to a white man's world in a developed country and stare at them and be like, oh, nee, megalo, this is how they're living, megalo mehema jeevat. Like, they don't have that opportunity. So she's, in a way, she's very socially conscious, right? She's very conscientious. She's very aware of the social situation. So you told him this on a sunny day, and the two of them get into a huge argument, okay? And here, both of them are screaming. Your voices were raised. So she's actually screaming for the first time. And I think this is probably the first time where she actively sort of voices the rage and disappointment and all the deep kind of disappointed emotions she's carrying around in her, right? That's really interesting. Later on, take a read through this argument they have. But it's interesting that it's only after this huge fight that the thing that wrapped itself around your neck, that nearly choked you before you fell asleep, started to loosen and to let go. Don't you find that interesting? So after having suppressed all her thoughts and emotions and feelings for that long, it's only after the huge fight and after sort of bashing it out with him and screaming at him that this thing actually starts to loosen and she can fall asleep again. Okay? And then just let's to quickly run through this. So there are instances of racism. There's racism here, people's reactions that the two of them are abnormal. You can't be a white male and a black woman together. So all these questions, all these racial tensions happening. And but then it comes to the partner's parents, right? The parents seem really well educated and nice people, like from a good social upbringing and all of that. And she's grateful that they didn't examine her like an exotic trophy or like an ivory tusk. So, like, what is this reference to? An ivory tusk? It's it's kind of like a remnant of colonization too, right? It's sort of in like the Silk Route and in the trade, colonial trades. They used to bring things from exotic east and they used to bring it to the west. And people who had never seen these things, they were like, oh my god, like elephant tuskers and so many like I don't know peacock feathers and things that they had never seen. So she's grateful that they just see her as a human being and not as some exotic object, right? And afterwards, what does this guy do? He starts telling her about his issues with his parents, like how they want him to go to law school and they will only love him if they go to law school. And you wanted to sympathize, but instead you were angry. Okay? Again, think about this in terms of what we were thinking about in the slides. Where is this anger building up from? Why is she getting angrier and angrier at this dude like that she's dating, right? Again says you were angrier when he told you that he had refused to go up to Canada with them for a week or two to their summer cottage in the Quebec countryside. So he's this privileged. They are so rich that they actually have a separate cottage to go to in Canada for the summer. So when they just want to go on vacation, they have a different house over there. So Mecha Deval Tibilat, and this guy is just complaining about his life, like, and she can't relate to any of this because you get it, right? She is coming from a very different social background and a very different social structure, and she's dealing with so many different things, and this guy is talking about things that are completely alien to her. And she gets so angry that she drops a glass and it's shattered on the hardwood of his apartment floor. And he asked what was wrong. And then look what starts to happen. You said nothing, although you knew a lot was wrong. Later in the shower, you started to cry. You watched the water dilute your tears and you didn't know why you were crying. So, on one aspect, again, the silence is starting up. Remember, the thing around her neck was loosening and she was finding it easy to talk. Again, now into the short story, silence is coming. Okay? She's losing her words again. But on the other hand, you wrote home finally. She manages to write home to her parents. A short letter to your parents slipped in between crisp dollar bills and you included your address. And what's the first reply that she gets? Immediately, she gets news from her mother that her father died. Her father has died 5 months ago, actually, and they had no way of informing her because why? Because all this time she didn't write to them and she didn't even share her address with them, right? So, 5 months now, she wrote. They had used some of the money you sent to give him a good funeral. They killed a goat for the guests and buried him in a good coffin. So, look at the contrast. Like we were talking all of this time about contrast in the short story. On one hand, there's a white male, a privileged, educated white male, who is complaining about having to go to Canada to stay in a summer cottage with his parents and who's complaining about having to go to law school and how he doesn't want. And then there's her family, the girl whose family used her money, like the money she sent, to kill a goat and feed people for her father's funeral. So completely opposite social backgrounds, right? Um, and you curled up in bed, pressed your knees to your chest, and tried to remember what you had been doing. So then here's this point. that I was telling you about the goosebumps. See, on the day your whole body had been covered in goosebumps that you could not explain, Yuan was teasing you about taking over from the chef so the heat in the kitchen would warm you. So Yuan had noticed this, right? And then she thinks about the contrast in her life. Like maybe the father had died while she was doing these random things, while she was going on dates with this guy and just enjoying herself, and the father had died and she had no idea. But so imagine the guilt, the sort of guilt that she's carrying with her now, right? Okay, we were finishing the last bit of the short story. Um, yes, here we are. So, can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so then we were at this point where again, there's when she tells him about her father's death and she describes to him what had happened, he tries to comfort her. He holds you while you cry, he smooths your hair, but again he comes in offering to buy the ticket, right? Again, financial power. So there's this sort of implicit idea that I am richer than you, so I can buy things for you. So offered to buy your ticket to go to see your family. And look at what she says. She said, you said no, you needed to go alone. So again, this brings us to that interesting point of Akuna's character and who she is actually as a person. And this girl who was getting silent bit by bit and not speaking to him so much, again, she finds her voice again and she vocalizes. She said, you said no, you needed to go alone. So for the first time, she's articulating, this is what I need. This is what I'm going to do. I don't want your money. So he asked if you would come back, and you reminded him that you had a green card and you would lose it if you do not. Now, what does that mean? Do you understand the context of that sentence?
She thinks of coming back.
Okay, what does it mean? So, do you know the politics? So, the basic thing here is if you have a green card, if you're given sort of citizen, it's like permanent residency in the states is what a green card is. So if you're given that so it's a lottery where you, if you win it, you have permanent. So if you have that green card, you can't stay out of the country for more than a year, which means if you're not in US at that time, you lose your residency status. So she has a condition where even if she goes to Nigeria, she definitely has to come back to US, right? Unless she's ready to like give up her American citizenship and she just wants to stay in Nigeria for the rest of her life. But when he knows this and she knows this, but when he asked if you would come back, she pulls the sort of socio-political aspect of it and she talks about the condition of it. I need to come back because I will lose my green card if I don't. But he says that's not what he meant. He wasn't talking about the green card. Would you come back? So what is the guy asking at this point? He's asking, are you going to come back to me? Because I think by this point, both of them kind of know that this relationship is over because they've started to see how sort of like different they are and how the worlds are apart and might not really merge. So he has a sense. So he's like, would you come back, come back? Like, would you come back to me is what he's asking. And again, you turned away and said nothing, right? So again, she's choosing silence. Like again, the person who was silent for the longest time, and then she loosened that hold around her neck and she was able to talk, and then again she's back to being silent. She's like, you turned away and said nothing. And when he drove you to the airport, you hugged him tight for a long moment and then you let go. Okay, so this then you let go is very interesting because the ending of the short story is actually left very ambiguous. Okay, it's unclear. It's unclear in two ways. Would she come back to the guy, to her lover? Which we kind of have the sense that she probably wouldn't, right? It feels like the relationship has ended and she doesn't really want to come back to him. But then there's also when she says then you let go, what is she letting go of? Is she letting go of America too? Is she going to come back? Will she come back? Will she not come back? She did say that she needs to come back if she wants to keep her green card, but the last four words are very interesting, and then you let go. So What is she letting go of? So the ambiguity of that ending is really interesting for us to think about. So that's the short story. Do you have any questions about the short story particularly, or shall we go back to the last? I think we have like 2 slides left. What do you want to do?
I mean, I'll ask after the slides. Okay.
Okay, you want to go to the slides? Let's do that. So after we went through the short story and after going through all of this, I asked you the last slide that we left on was list down the characteristics or traits you find in Akuna's personality. Do you want to do a quick list of those for me? Off the top of your head, or now that you've thought about it, how would you describe Akuna's personality or character?
She seems headstrong and
Okay, headstrong,
independent.
independent.
And
Is she intelligent?
yeah.
Is she aware of what's happening and intelligent about the world around her and about sort of dynamics between people?
Yes.
What about why would you say she refuses money from him? Why is she refusing money? Why is she angry when he offers money and presents and tries to give her things? What is that element of her character?
A sense of pride, maybe.
She has a sense of pride and dignity, right? Dignity is a very strong element of her. She knows who she is, and just because she's African or from like a relatively third world or whatever country, she's not okay with people handing her things and sort of like trying to look after her. So she has that sense of individuality and pride, right? What else is she? Would you say that she's a complex character, like with the feelings that she has?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, she's not very straightforward, right? Like you can't really place her. And I kind of the sense I got from the short stories, you don't even get the sense that she's very interested in or eager about America. Like I feel like okay, she just got the lottery, so she came because it was a chance. But do you think that she seems very ambitious or that she really wants to stay, like, settle down in States or something, Kayla?
Mm.
Yeah,
And the key,
hmm?
even in the relationship, her reason of dating him was just because his eyes were green, like olives or something.
Yeah, and the relationship, I think, for the most part, it was just loneliness. She was just lonely and wanted someone to be with. But she's a very kind of ambiguous character too. She's very not straightforward. There's a lot of layers to her, but she's also highly intelligent and a very perceptive character. She notices everything and she knows what she's talking. So these are things for you to think about in terms of Akuna's character, but also in terms of try to do the same thing for the male, like the lover's character as well, the partner's character. What sort of a character is he? What I think the in order for you to get into the analysis, the best way is to start thinking of some adjectives. How would you describe this male character?
He has a bright personality.
He has a bright personality.
He seems to escape like the problem.
Okay, he's escapist. Okay, that's good. And what else? Would you say that he is? Do you feel that he is a bit pretentious?
Yes.
Okay, so just think about what sort of a personality he has as well. And he's also pretty, I think he's not as layered or complex as Akuna. But wait, what is happening? Can you see me on camera?
Yes.
Okay, I can't see that. But he's also not like a black and white character per se. So just try to analyze his characteristics as well and see. And this question is really important. So because we're getting towards the ending of the short story, so I want you to think about what are the ways that Akuna takes her power back in the story. So we were talking a lot about her oppression and her sort of like systemic being oppressed and having power taken away from her. And if you kind of combine that with, if you combine power with a voice, being able to speak and having a voice, we looked at the ways that her voice is taken away from her, but towards the ending of the short story, look at the ways that she takes her power back. What are the choices she makes in order to sort of bring her, what sort of choices does she make to reposition her in a place of power where she makes the choices for her life and not that somebody else is doing it for her, right? So that's something really important to think about. So I'm just going to end here. So this, if you've ever seen, this is the actual cover of the thing
It's
around your
missing
neck.
actually.
What's that?
I can still see the book. Can't see the.
How can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier before I moved there. So, really think about this question. What are the ways that Akuna takes her power back in the story? Okay, how does she get back her power in little ways, the thing that was taken away from her? So, now we move on to this. What I was saying is this is the actual cover of the book. And you can see like how they've depicted that thing around her neck. It's kind of like a python, kind of like a snake. So that's how it is. So we need to think about the ending and how she takes back her power there, right? So here's a quote. Now, this is the writer, Chimamanda Adichie. There's a quote by her that says, "The problem of gender targets women. The problem was not about being human, but specifically being a female human. For centuries, the world divided human beings into two groups and then proceeded to exclude and oppress one group. It's only fair that the solution to the problem acknowledges that." So this is in a more like a feminist or gender kind of a view, right? So I want you to reflect on these questions now that we're towards the end of the story. What do you think was the thing around the neck of the main character Akuna? Now that we've gone through all of it, try to come up with your own interpretation, right? Then think who helped to sort of hang or put that thing around her neck. Did she do it herself? Did somebody else do it? Who actually put it around her neck? Where did it come from? And also, who, if anybody, helped to ease or remove it? That thing that was put around her neck, who helped put it onto her? And who helped to remove it? Okay? And then, towards the ending, since we were looking at the ending of the short story, look at this final question. Why does the character choose silence again in the end? And is this silence, the silence that we have towards the ending of the short story, is it different to the previous times that she was silent, or is it the same kind of silence? Okay, that's a really good, interesting question for you to think about. Are those all the times where she didn't speak up and she was quiet? Is that silence similar to the silence at the ending of the short story? I want you to think about it yourself really well and go and ponder about that. But or what do you think, like right now, from what you can think about, what do you think about those kinds of silences?
The last one seems different.
Different? Okay, different how do you feel that it's different?
Because it seems like she's decided on something. There's no uncertainty.
Yes, precisely. And it's also, it's not a silence that was imposed on her, right? It's not somebody, she's not silent because of, like, it's not that somebody else made her silent or a situation made her. This is her consciously choosing silence. So there's always a difference between being silent because you can't speak up or because you don't have the option of speaking, and choosing silence because you choose to be silent. Like, that's a choice that you're making. So really think about why this silence at the end feels different. And in a sense, does it feel more powerful? Does it feel more of a powerful silence where I know who I am, I've made my decision, I've taken the choice, and this is the silence that I choose? So that's something for you to think about. And I think that's all of the slides actually. So how was it so far, and what questions do you have remaining?
Question, I think about the narrative style and as to why the guy is actually nameless and kind of ambiguous. Is
Okay.
there any reason behind it?
I think you should think about that yourself. I think that that's an interesting thing actually, a point. Like the narrative style, and also the way the you form, right? Why would she choose to dictate this, like narrate this story, not as I? She could have just easily said, I was from Nigeria, I went with my uncle and I moved to America. Why is it you? What happens with the choice? Because every element in a short story is generally a choice that's made for a specific reason. So what do you think happens when she inserts that pronoun of you into the narration?
It
What do you
kind
think
of
happens?
resonates with the reader, maybe.
it it applies to a broader audience, right? It could be anyone who is reading the book. It could be any immigrant who's reading it. It could be any woman who's read it and been in a similar situation of a male exploiting her for sexual favors or something. It broadens the readership and it kind of pulls you into the story. And it's a very interesting narrative choice made. And in respect to the, like, when you're thinking about that, also think of it again in terms of, if she had made the choice to make it I, how would the story have changed? Do you think the story would have been this powerful? Do you think it would have been more powerful? So those are, Nikang, like, try to slip in into a paragraph, try to narrate it in I form and see whether the same impact happens through the short story, and then that'll sort of give you the answers of why she's choosing that specifically. And in terms of why the male character is nameless, I think that's also really important. Again, it's a conscious choice. Is it about keeping the focus on the female protagonist and not giving him, if you really think about it, it's kind of like taking power away from him in a way as well, right? By not naming a person. One thing you how would you say it? Like, in the short story, all that time, she was the invisible one. She was the one who wasn't an individual and didn't have a sort of like a set parameters to her being. But then you have this male protagonist who doesn't even have a name. And again, isn't that a form of kind of, I don't know. That's really interesting. It's the first time I'm thinking about it, but isn't it also kind of like a form of erasure of individuality? Is she making him like a stereotypical white male? Like, could he be any white man? Is that what she's trying to say? Why doesn't he have a specific name? Yeah? Think
Seems
about
like
those. What's that?
it does seem like that.
Think about them a bit more, because the thing about literature and the thing about any kind of work is that there's no one interpretation. You can interpret it in any way you want, just come up with your own theories. Like, think about it and say, I think this is the reason why this male protagonist doesn't have a name. These are the reasons, and then justify it with your reasons. So you can completely come up with your own theories for that. So, yeah, that's about it. And you said you had some questions about the male character. Are those clear enough now?
Yeah, it's like
Okay. I think we've covered everything then. I hope this was helpful.
yes, very much.
Okay. Okay, then you can head off. I will stop recording and stop the screen share. If you want, I can upload this up on YouTube or something so you can take a look at it. And I thought maybe I'll just leave it online so that anyone who's doing A levels or wants to take a look can also take, I don't know, view the video if they want. What do you think? Yeah? Okay, so I'll stop the recording now then. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much.
Okay, no worries then. Okay, bye bye then.
Bye.